Shalom Aleichem. It is Sunday morning here in sunny Jerusalem, which is bad because it's not supposed to be sunny. The 18th of December, the 24th of Kislev, and tonight we light the first Hanukkah candle. And we're going to start with Likkutei Sichot, Volume 1 for Parshas Mikeitz. Probably do this for 2 days and then switch to Hanukkah, because that's how it is organized here also. So let's see what he says. Bereish parashat Mikeitz, v'chen b'parasha kodemet v'yesh mesupar al chalomot. So at the beginning of Parshas Mikeitz, we hear about the dreams of Pharaoh, and it's also the topic of the previous parsha that we just read on Shabbos, Parshas Vayeshev, where we also hear about Yosef's dreams and the dreams of the minister of drink and the minister of baking. Right, these were two big ministers in Egypt. The butler, yeah, it's not exactly the butler. The butler is like a small-time dude who pours only wine into Pharaoh's cup. This guy, he's a minister, which means that he takes care. He has the honor of also pouring into Pharaoh's cup, but he has the duty of taking care of all the wine, all the drinks in the palace. And the same thing goes with the baker, that he's also, he makes, he was. Both of them are no longer. In any case, if we already brought them up, here's how you need to look, this is what the Malbim says, how you need to look at Yosef's 12 years in prison. We think that, it was a very terrible sentence. It was. But he was a very popular guy there. We know that everybody was around him. Everything centered and revolved around what Yosef did in prison, because he was such a great logistics person, and he knew how to talk to people, and he knew how to get them to do what needed to be done. But there's a hint that the Torah gives us. The minister of all the wine is there. The minister of all the baked goods is there. What's going on? What kind of prison is this? This was a white-collar prison. It wasn't like a blue-collar prison. It wasn't like people who made... It was actually, in that sense, worse, because these were people who offended Pharaoh. But they were high-ranking officials. The only two people that we know were there, except for Yosef, are these two high-ranking officials. And we know one more person who's involved, Sarat HaBachim. It's his prison, as it were. And he's also a very high-ranking official. So right away, Malbim says, this is not a regular prison. He was sent to the prison where all the people who offend the palace go. These are all people who know the inner workings of Egypt. So what did Yosef do for 12 years? He learned from the inside, from people who hated the government, that he learned how it works. When Yosef came out to interpret the dream, he was probably the most knowledgeable person in Egypt about how the inner workings of the government were, like how it worked. And so there's an amazing thing that I heard in the name of the Rebbe Rayatz. I don't know if the person who told me this didn't tell me where the source is, so we need to look for it. He says, the Rebbe Rayatz asks, after Yosef interprets the dream, we all know he does something very strange. He tells Pharaoh what to do. I just told you there's going to be 7 years of famine, first 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of famine. What should you do? So he says, you need to appoint a wise and comprehensive man who understands and knows and is God-fearing and this and that. Wait. So listen. That's a Sichot from the Rebbe. This is apparently from the Rebbe Rayatz. So listen to what happens. It says at the very end, after he tells him exactly what needs to be done, let's say he wasn't telling him what to do, he's saying what needs to be done. And it's based on the dream. Great, it's an interpretation, it's part of the dream. It says, and it found favor in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants. And the Rebbe Rayatz asks, why in the world does the Torah tell us that it found favor in the eyes of the servants? Who cares? Isn't Pharaoh all that matters? So he says, you don't understand how this works. If you, an outsider, suddenly show up in the throne room and you suddenly have these great ideas about what needs to be done to save Egypt, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be cut down, defamed, marginalized, made into a blobbing idiot by the people who are on the inside. They're not going to let anyone in there. Certainly not someone who just came from the prison. There's no way in the world they would let that happen. So what did Yosef do? Yosef, when he was saying Pharaoh should find a wise and understanding and comprehensive man with these qualities and those qualities, all the time he was looking at the servants. He said, a wise and understanding and comprehensive. And he's telling them, there's an opportunity here. You don't need to cut me down. I'm going to raise you higher. You're going to become that person. Each one of them, of course, thinks that he's the most fitting for the task. It's a brilliant move. So when he finishes, they're all very content. Pharaoh's happy because he told them what the meaning of the dream is. All the servants are happy because they all see an opportunity. They stop thinking about the fact that they have to get rid of this guy because this guy just handed them the greatest opportunity they've had in their lives. What potential! So they don't say anything. They look at Pharaoh, they hear, no, who are you going to appoint? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be me? Each one of them, of course, is thinking about himself. And Pharaoh surprises them all and says, you, Joseph, you're the person who's the right person for this task. That's an unbelievable parish. I think that is amazing. First of all, because it puts the entire 12 years in a completely different perspective. What was he doing? He was learning how to run Egypt. He was getting the best classes you could get from the people who are going to spill all the information you can't get anywhere else, and they're also angry at the government, so they're going to be saying everything. The second thing is that he uses part of his knowledge, and he's very sophisticated, and he makes sure that the first thing that should have happened to him, which was he should have been thrown to the dogs, didn't happen to him. It's amazing insight. In any case, so all these dreams are in Parshas Vayeshev and Parshas Mikeitz. Of course, we can add to that the dream that we had 2 weeks earlier, which was also Parshas Vayetze, when Yaakov goes out of Beersheba, and then he has a dream. He has his dream with the ladder. All four of these parshas have dreams. Vayetze, Vayishlach. Vayishlach had a lot of dreams. Yaakov's dreams when he learned how to genetically choose the right type of sheep so that he would increase his flocks. That was also from a dream. And then the dreams in yesterday's parsha Vayeshev, and then Mikeitz. Almost all the dreams in the Torah, in the Chumash, in the Pentateuch, are in these 4 weeks, and all 4 of these weeks are always, I think almost always, maybe always entirely, in the month of Kislev. What does it have to do with the month of Kislev? Because we know that the month of Kislev, its sense is the sense of sleep. So there's different meanings to what does that mean. When Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, says each one of the months has a sense, you have to think about what does it mean by that? What does it mean to sleep? Well, one of the explanations is that to sleep is to dream. The sense of sleep is a sense of dreaming. So that's why all these dreams are in this month, the month of Kislev. But the Rebbe here goes in a different direction. It says all these dreams, apart from the fact that they're in Kislev, they were the reason for the exile in Egypt. Right? Because without these dreams that Joseph had, his dreams of seeing the moon, the sun, and 11 stars, and then the dreams of Pharaoh, we wouldn't have ended up in Egypt. Because everything is by Hashgacha, everything is by divine providence. It's clear that the result, which was exile, is related to the cause. The cause was dreaming. So dreaming is related to exile. Dreaming is essentially connected to a state of exile. And that's exactly what he explains in Torah, or that's what we learned a couple of years ago, maybe last year even. We learned that the Maimer in Torah, or Shir HaMa'alot, B'shuv Hashem Shivat Zion Einu Kecholmim, that Dibur HaMatchil. And there he talks about the fact that dreams bring opposites together. That you can see things that are opposite together. Chalom noveh mikoach hadimion, because dreams, they emerge from the power of imagination. The power of imagination is tremendously important. which is, by the way, why imagination wakes up. It's awakened the moment we start thinking about godliness, about spirituality, because usually when a person starts thinking about godliness, whether he knows it or not, he's entertaining paradoxes. And paradoxes awaken the imagination. Because what does the Rambam, for instance, Maimonides says, what's the ultimate form of imagination? A ship made out of metal flying through the air. Couldn't imagine such a thing back then. So we talked a little about this a few weeks ago. What was he missing? He was missing the concept of lift. There was no concept yet of what we call hashra'ah, of omnipresence. That the air is omnipresent, it's everywhere. So that's why wherever you go, the wings of the aircraft are lifted up by the change in the pressure between above the wing and under the wing. But there has to be air everywhere, and that was a concept that wasn't yet fully understood. In any case, Chalom noveh mikoach hadimion, dreams come from the power of the imagination, which has the ability to combine two opposite and contrarian things together. Even as the Gemara says in Masechet Brachos, as it says in the Talmud, Pila bekupa demachta, an elephant passing through the eye of a needle. Right?
Can you see that in
Yes, you can. But not only that, you can actually see it passing. You can actually, it's not just that the elephant becomes small, you can actually see it pass. But there's many Maimarim about this in Chassidus, because this is it's a very essential topic to Chassidus. It's what are the types of paradoxes that the human mind can tolerate. So it says that you can even see a real life-sized elephant passing through a real life-sized needle. It's to that level. It's not just that the elephant can become small and the eye of the needle can become big. It's actually with their real sizes. You can imagine that in your mind because it's completely paradoxically impossible. Kach gam ha'adam bizman. Im lifnei kan yireh ha'adam b'kach. As long as a person had entertained some idea of this before, then he can put these things together in his mind when he sleeps, when he's dreaming. Kach gam bizman hagalut. The same is true of exile. La'adam nidmeh shu ohev et HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now the Rebbe takes this in a very specific area. He says a person imagines, he thinks that he loves God. V'im zot et gufo atzmo. And yet at the same time he also thinks he loves his body. Whereas it's not possible. You can't do both at the same time. It's either what he says, your body. Why is he not saying his self? I'm imagining that's what it says in the Yiddish. Meaning, it's either me or Hashem in the sense that, remember we talked on Friday about the bee. We said you have to have a hive mind. So this whole idea of clarifying the sparks, of bringing up, elevating the sparks, within reality, he says you should be like a bee, who everything that it does for the hive. It doesn't do it for itself. So the honey that it produces, it doesn't produce it for itself. It produces it for the hive. It won't use it up on its way. It won't eat it on its way. It will wait until it reaches the hive. So it's the same thing. Why? Because even when you do elevation of sparks, so a person could say, well, my task in the world is to collect as many riches as I can. It's all for me. He says, you shouldn't care who actually in the end elevated the sparks, just as the bees don't care who visited which flower. In fact, if another bee was there first and took the pollen, our bee comes and there's nothing left, it doesn't go beat up the other bee and say, how dare you take from my flowers, these are my flowers, not yours. It's all for the hive, they don't care. That's the way you should be thinking. If you're thinking about yourself, you're not thinking about God. That's the point. If you're centered, if you're egocentric, you're not God-centric. We've talked about that. That was the big change that happened when Copernicus suggested that the planets revolve around the sun. The spiritual meaning of that is that we're not egocentric. Geocentrism, putting the earth in the middle, is like egocentrism. It's almost the same word, also geo and ego. But really, what does it signify? It signifies that the person that puts himself in the center, and then he has to figure out how everything is revolving around him. And it's really, really complex. But the moment you take yourself out of the center and you put God in the center, like heliocentrism, you put the sun, and we're all revolving around God, it's actually a very simple picture of the solar system. It's a much more simpler picture of reality. It's much easier to understand what we're all doing here. If a person thinks he's in the middle, it's all very complex. But in a dream, in the time of exile, that's what a person has. He thinks it's both around me and around God at the same time. He puts himself in the center and he puts God in the center. But it really can't be that way. And this can affect him so much that he thinks that he's revolving around God, but he's actually revolving around himself, that he can come to sin and to pursue his cravings. בכל זאת מסיק בתורה אור, אין לטעות ולומר שהיות ולאחר סיום התפילה נקלע האדם למצב רוחני מנוגד מכפי שהיה בזמן התפילה מהווה הדבר הוכחה שתפילתו, תורתו, מצוותיו אינם שווים כלום. Still, you should not come to the conclusion, because of this, that even if you are egocentric, even if you are revolving around yourself, you think the entire universe, including God, revolves around you. It doesn't mean that your mitzvos, that the commandments that you fulfill, and the Torah that you learn, and the davening that you daven, the prayers that you pray, don't think that they are worthless. That's not true. Why? שורשו של החלום הוא בדרגה נעלית מאוד המהירה בזמן הגלות דווקא. So he says, really this state of thinking of both things is actually a very high state. It's not a low state. Like we said, it's how we understand paradox. It's essential. This idea of dreaming is essential to understanding paradox. So why is it not worthless? First of all, because you did the mitzvah. But it's not only that. It's that we are approaching such a reality. We are looking forward to that reality where, on the one hand, everything is godly. On the other hand, the self is not eradicated completely. That is the future state. It's just that it's not the state right now. A person here is fooling himself. He's thinking that I'm revolving around God, but he's really revolving around himself. So this is the intensity of the dream is actually from a very high place. This ability to put two things together. A paradox, we know where it's from. It's from the highest part of the crown. The highest part of the crown is where paradoxes emanate from, and they filter down into the lower parts of the crown also. But there's different levels of paradox, right? In the same way as in mathematics today. What does this mean in terms of the psyche, in terms of psychology of the person? Every Jew's divine soul is always complete. It's always whole. Like we said, the mitzvah that you did is a mitzvah. The commandment you fulfilled is a commandment, because your divine soul is whole. Just the fact that you still revolve around yourself doesn't mean that your divine soul isn't whole. In fact, it's fulfilling its purpose. How is it fulfilling its purpose? It's going into exile in you, even in a state in which you revolve around yourself, where you're egocentric. But every mitzvah is eternal. What does a mitzvah mean? We talked about this many times. A mitzvah is a chance, is an opportunity to hold on to the eternity. That's what a mitzvah. Because all the other actions that we do in life, they will all be passing. They will all eventually pass from the world. They won't leave an impression forever. But commandments are a way to touch the eternal. And the flip side is, of course, that everything else is temporal. It is passing. Because in the end, everyone will do tshuva. They will return to God. And what does it mean to return to God? When you return to God, everything that you did that was negative or not fitting has new meaning, and it itself becomes part of a mitzvah, the mitzvah of returning to God, which is a mitzvah. In fact, in a sense, this is the highest mitzvah. Why is return to God the highest mitzvah? Because it says God created 8 things before He created the world. One of them is tshuva. And tshuva, returning to God, is a state that supersedes. It came before the world itself. So even when you came and you did something wrong, that was under the understanding that whatever action you do, you can still overturn it. You can turn it over. You can flip it. This reminds me of a Zohar that was in last week's Parsha. One of the ways you can see how ancient the text is, you can see how dense it is. So the Zohar in I think it's 10 words, says the following idea, which takes many more words to explain. It says it was a good thing that the brothers sold Joseph into slavery. Why? Because if they wouldn't have, they couldn't have come out of Egypt. That's what it says. Now you have to figure out, well, what? Why? I thought that the reason they went into Egypt was because they sold him and then they came after him. And what's going on here? So the explanation is, by selling him into slavery, they showed that they owned him. He could have fought them, and he could have tried to kill them or be killed in the process. A person who doesn't want to go into slavery doesn't have to. There's options. You can fight to the death. But by going along with it, he was showing that, yes, he belonged to them. Then Joseph went down to Egypt. And when he went down to Egypt, at first he was a slave, but then he became the viceroy. And when he was the viceroy, during the years of the famine, all of Egypt sold themselves as slaves to Joseph. So what do we have here? That when the tribes came down, when Jacob and his family came down, seemingly they became enslaved to Egypt. But Egypt themselves were enslaved to Joseph. But Joseph was already enslaved to them, to the tribes. So we have that their ownership of Joseph superseded everything that happened afterwards. So that's why they could leave Egypt, because it said that there was a law that no slave could ever leave Egypt. How were they able to leave? Because they were really the owners of Egypt. It's an incredible thought process of the Zohar. It says this in 10 words. It's an amazing, very dense, that's how ancient texts are. Okay. So we'll continue this tomorrow. And then I think on Tuesday we'll start Hanukkah. We have a lot of time for Hanukkah.
8 days.
Oh. We're going to take up one day already, but then we'll have more days. Okay.